Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to DupeBlocker General Training Session. My name is Kelly Jenkins, and I'll be walking you through the DupeBlocker app today. And at a very high level, what DupeBlocker is it is a duplicate prevention tool. So it attempts to stop people from entering duplicates into your system. Okay, it's important to understand that DupeBlocker only works with single inserts and single updates. So it does not prevent or detect duplicates for anything done in batch. Okay, and that includes through the user interface, the Salesforce user interface, or even the API if your batch size is set to 1. Okay, we're going to be walking through DupeBlocker as it installs. I've made a few minor changes to mine, and I will highlight those as we come across them, but we will be looking at it as it installs. And most of our DupeBlocker users are also Demand Tools users, and they're familiar with that product. DupeBlocker is a little bit different in that it actually installs into Salesforce. Okay, so you're going to access it in the upper right-hand corner in your list of apps. Okay, I'm already in it. And it installs with these 7 tabs. We're going to look at all of them. And I'm going to start with the DupeBlocker Today page, just a few administrative things to talk about on the DupeBlocker Today page. And starting with your version number. Okay, and I'm highlighting that in the upper left-hand corner, but it's really hard to see because they are both blue. The most current version of DupeBlocker is 3.8.12. If you're not on the most current version, you will see an upgrade banner. If you see that upgrade banner, please upgrade. We always recommend you're running the latest version of DupeBlocker. Okay. Also from this screen is the self-help. So everything that I'm going to say today is out here for your reference. It's actually 2 clicks. It's this middle one here. Okay. So in here, you're going to find all the documentation. As you're getting started, your key documents are going to be setup and scenarios. Okay. Finally, from the Today page is the live training. So I'm sure many of you are aware of how to register for live training. That's how you got to this call. But maybe somebody registered on your behalf, or maybe you registered from an email. I just like to let everybody know that we offer training on all of our products and our modules within Demand Tools. These classes are free to take. You can take them as many times as you'd like and as often as you'd like. Okay. The times are noted in East Coast time, but if you drill into one of them, and click the Register Here button, that's where you're going to be able to see it in your time zone. Okay. The default behavior of GoToWebinar is that everybody is muted. However, I encourage questions. So if you have any questions, I just ask that you type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar. I get a little indicator letting me know somebody's asked a question, so I'll keep my eye on that throughout the session. And then finally, I'm always asked this at some point, so I'm going to say it up front. Is the session being recorded? And let me make sure I hit the record button. I did. So yes, the session is being recorded. If you want a copy of it at the end of the call, you can just email me directly. And I will pick those up and send it out when it's done converting. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with DupeBlocker. We are going to spend a majority of our time in the DupeBlocker Scenarios tab and the DupeBlocker Settings tab. Okay. The Scenarios tab is where we are going to tell DupeBlocker what a duplicate is, so we're going to define for it what a duplicate is, and then we're going to tell it what we want it to do when it finds a duplicate. And various things in the scenarios are going to require us to visit the Settings tab. Okay. But when you install DupeBlocker, the very first thing you want to do is visit the settings tab. Okay, I don't know why it's a technical requirement, but it initiates the scenarios tab. So I'm going to right click and open this. Okay. The administrator email, whoever installs DupeBlocker, their email is going to go here, their email address. This person's going to be notified anytime DupeBlocker experiences a problem. Okay, they'll be notified via email. Some people don't want to receive those emails and they will blank out this field. And I don't ever recommend doing that, because if you do, that error email will be sent to your user, which is usually not an admin, and it will make no sense to them. Okay. If you don't want to receive those directly, I would recommend putting in some sort of designated email, like admin@crmfusion.com. So they're going to some email address other than your user. We will cover all of these as they become relevant, but while we're here, the Disable DupeBlocker checkbox is not checked, which means DupeBlocker is enabled. However, it is not affecting your users until you start building scenarios and deploying them. Okay, so some people ask, why would I ever want to disable DupeBlocker? And the answer to that is, I mentioned earlier that DupeBlocker is not going to detect duplicates with anything done in batch, and that's true. But it will still go through a key building process, and we'll talk about keys a little bit later. But so it'll do the key rebuilds on batch inserts and batch updates, and it could significantly slow down your job, like if you use the data loader or demand tools. So some people want to come in here, turn it off, run their batch insert or batch update, and then come back and re-enable it. If you do ever disable DupeBlocker, you will have to go rebuild your keys once you re-enable it. Okay. When you install DupeBlocker, you can build scenarios to detect duplicates on accounts, contacts, and leads, those three objects, and that includes lead to contact scenarios and lead to account scenarios. DupeBlocker, however, is compatible or can detect duplicates with all of your objects. If there's an object that you want to build scenarios for, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, you'll need to come to the Enable Objects sub-tab on the left and find that object. So say I wanted to create case scenarios, you want to highlight and choose Enable. Now, I'm not really going to do that because it's one of those things that does take a few minutes. It's got to run through all the unit tests, and it's going to email me when it's done. But down here, this is one customization that I've made to my org. I've enabled my classes object, my opportunity object, and my feed item object. So feed item would be your chatter objects or your chatter entries. My classes object is a custom object, and I can tell that because it is suffixed with __C. Okay, so it works with standard objects and then also your custom objects, which will always have the __C in it. Okay, so now let's bounce to the Scenarios tab. I will right-click and open this. And I'm going to put this in the view of all. And what we're looking at here, these are the scenarios that ship with the tool. Okay, except for this one. I just created this one. We're going to do this demo on the contacts object since not everybody uses leads. At the very end of this call, I'm going to ask for questions, and if there aren't any questions, people who do not use leads are more than welcome to stay and listen to the lead discussion, but you're also more than welcome to drop off. Okay, so the lead discussion will be using this scenario. So as I mentioned, these are the scenarios that ship with the tool. some people will come in here and deploy them. Okay, so it's not affecting my users until it's deployed. But I would say that over 90% of our customers they have a custom definition of what a duplicate is, and they build their own scenarios. It's very rare that I see these used. So we're going to do this on the contact, and we're going to build a scenario from scratch. So I'm going to go to new DupeBlocker scenario. And everything in Salesforce needs a name, so we'll call this my contact. It looks like I've used this before, my contact scenario. Okay. The scenario type field is where we're going to tell it which object we want to detect duplicates on. And as I mentioned, we're going to be doing this on the contact object. If you've enabled any other objects, they're going to be below this non-standard. So there's my feed item, my classes, and my opportunity. But we'll choose contact here. Now the next two fields are the match on insert action and the match on update action. Okay, so this is where we're going to tell DupeBlocker what we want it to do when somebody inserts a record that matches another existing record, versus what we want DupeBlocker to do when somebody updates an existing record that then makes it match another existing record. Okay, so we can have two different actions upon those two things, insert versus update. Our options upon insert are going to be do not insert. This actually blocks the user. So when they push the save button and DupeBlocker detects a duplicate, they're going to see an error that I define in right here, like you cannot enter this record. They're going to see that in red text, and they will be provided a link to the existing record. Their only options are going to be to cancel out or to follow that link. Either way, their record is not going to be saved. Okay. The next option upon an insert is to redirect the user to the existing record. So when DupeBlocker detects a match, well, let me say this differently. When the person hits the save button and then DupeBlocker detects a match, their record is not going to be saved. They will be redirected to the existing record. Our next option is to report the duplicate. The user experience here is going to be that when the user pushes the save button, their record will be saved. And then when DupeBlocker detects the duplicate, it's going to create a warning record, which is a DupeBlocker object. And it's going to, related to that, there's going to be potential duplicates. So essentially, it's going to allow me to review the data before committing to a merge or deciding that they are deliberate duplicates. We have the option to do nothing. So the user experience here is they push the save button and DupeBlocker detects the duplicate, and it quite literally does nothing. It doesn't create a warning, it just lets them do it. And then the final option that we're going to look at today is the auto merge option. So the user experience here is when the user hits the save button on their record's actually saved. And then immediately following that save, a merge occurs. If you choose this option, it is important to understand that the incoming record or the record that's being inserted is always the subordinate record, and the existing record or the record it matched to in Salesforce is always the master record. Now, when we take a deeper dive into the auto merge settings, I'm going to show you where you can choose which values from each record survive. But in terms of the IDs, that existing record ID is always going to be the one that survives. and there's no way to change that. These next two we're not going to look at today, but I'm just going to talk about them at a high level. They are developer options, and I'll point out as they come relevant where we're going to come across use cases for these. But redirect to a custom visual force page allows you to create a visual force page, and when DupeBlocker detects a duplicate, it will take your user directly to that custom visual force page. And then the custom apex code option. It allows you to define what you want DupeBlocker to do when it finds a match. So in other words, you let DupeBlocker do the matching, then you call in your own code to tell it what to do when it detects a duplicate. Of these options, the report duplicate is the most benign. And I guess what I mean when I say that is that it affects your users the least. And as people are getting started, they tend to start with the report duplicate option, okay? Because it allows your user to save the record. And then somebody reviews that for being a duplicate. The do not insert and redirect to existing options. These are referred to as blocking actions because the user record is not saved when they push the save button. So if you ever hear me refer to quote unquote blocking action, which I'll definitely be saying that when we talk about the leads, I am referring to scenarios that are set to do not insert or redirect to existing. Okay. Now, our match on update actions, so when somebody updates a record that then makes it match another record in Salesforce, our options are exactly the same. We just don't have as many options. So we can choose to do not update. So the user will see this error in red text. So maybe I want to change it to say that. We can report the duplicate, which allows the user to save that record, and then a warning will be created for review. Do nothing. So do nothing, I mentioned earlier, it literally does nothing. And I've only ever seen it used as an update action. I've seen people want to do something upon an insert and not upon an update. I've never really seen do nothing upon insert. It's kind of like, why would you have DupeBlocker if you're not going to do anything about the duplicates, right? And then the final action we can choose here upon an update is to call in our own custom Apex code. Okay. This column over here, deployed. Deployed means that this scenario is actively looking for duplicates. We are going to deploy it and we are going to test it. We're going to build it in its entirety and then we're going to test it. Okay, and we're actually going to look at all of these. The bypass security checkbox is necessary if you have private sharing in your org. So it's not checked by default. And if you don't use private sharing in your org, it's not relevant. But when it is unchecked and you use private sharing, let's say Kelly enters a record, DupeBlocker's only going to compare that record to other records that Kelly has read access to. What this checkbox does is it allows that record to be compared to all records in Salesforce. Okay, but what I like to be clear about with the bypass security option is it is never going to show somebody information they're not allowed to see. So, for example, if I have private sharing and I check my bypass security checkbox and I have a scenario set to redirect to existing, and Kelly enters a record and it matches a record she cannot read, DupeBlocker will redirect her to that record, but she will get the insufficient privileges screen. Okay. Enable dual filters. I think I accidentally checked this. By default, it is not checked. We're going to table this for when we talk about filtering. Person account scenario. If you use person accounts in your org and you are creating a lead scenario or an account scenario, you will need to have separate scenarios for your person accounts versus your business accounts, and here's where you identify that. Okay. And then finally, the rebuild needed checkbox means the keys need to be rebuilt for this scenario. Okay, you're an admin, so we can't stop you from manually checking and unchecking this box. But the takeaway from this box is don't ever manually uncheck it. I'm going to show you where you rebuild keys. And we're going to look at a key a little bit later, but just at a very high level, what a key is, it is a concatenation of the fields that I matched on, which we haven't done that yet, with the mapping types applied and the matching algorithms applied. And where two records have the same key tells DupeBlocker it found a duplicate. Okay. So let's save this record, and we've just created our first scenario. Okay. We have these two related lists here. We have DupeBlocker scenario rules. This is where we tell DupeBlocker which fields must match to be considered a duplicate. And then the next related list is the DupeBlocker scenario filters. This is where we tell DupeBlocker which records this scenario applies to. Okay. So circling back to the scenario rules, we're going to go with the example. We're going to require account name, first name, last name, and email match. So I'm going to start adding scenario rules. The first one I think I said was account name. So we can match on our contact fields, but if you scroll to the bottom, you can also match on account fields. So I'm going to go to account.name. I am missing it. Oh, it's up here, account name. Okay. When you match on account name, the go-to mapping type for matching account names is what we call the cleaned account name mapping type. And at a high level, what mapping types do is they allow us to match our fields without doing exact matching. Exact is the default, and it is always an option, but exact is exact is exact, right? Like a period, space, a comma can throw off that match. So the go-to mapping type here is the cleaned account name, and it references a list in the settings tab. So let me bounce back to the settings tab. Okay, there's a sub tab here for account name, cleaned account name. And then we've got the replacements, prefixes, and suffixes. The replace tab is going to find the values in this left column and replace it with the values in this right column. Okay, so for example, if somebody is entering St. Joe's Hospital, but St. Joe's Hospital already exists, it's going to find the match because Saint and ST are in here. And it works both directions, by the way. If somebody's inserting ST Joe's Hospital, but St. Joe's Hospital already exists, it'll detect the match. You can add your own values. So this list ships from dupe up. I was doing some testing down here, which these values don't make much sense, so you can kind of ignore that. But it looks like I did add hospital to hosp. So if somebody's inserting St. Joe's Hospital, but ST Joe's hosp exists, it'll detect the match. When you add your own values to this list, I think the wording we've got here is a little bit confusing. So the existing value is the long value of the word. And then the new value would be the short value. So if you did something like university to univ. You'd want to put it in like that. You wouldn't want to do the converse because it's going to find university and replace it with univ. If you did it the other way, and I had univ here and university here, and I have a record in Salesforce that says universal, it's going to take those first 4 letters and replace it with university. Okay. The prefix removal is going to ignore these words at the beginning of the field. So if somebody's inserting a record that says the Serum Fusion Corporation, but that's in Salesforce as Serum Fusion Corporation, it will detect the match by ignoring the. This list ships as is. I haven't thought of anything to add to it. And then finally, we have the suffix removal tab, which will ignore these words at the end of the field. So if somebody's inserting IBM Co., but IBM Company or IBM Inc. or IBM anything down this list exists, it will detect the match. Again, this list ships as is. Common things I see added here, if you're working with international data, right? And let's say German data, you GmbH to ignore that at the end of the field. Okay, and we'll put one more in there, I guess. One that I'm thinking of, PTY for Australian companies. The more you add to this list, the more robust your matching becomes. Okay. So back to our scenario rule, we're going to use the cleaned account name mapping type. And we can also apply these matching algorithms on top of them. Okay. English fuzzy is a phonetic match. It ignores vowels and analyzes the sounds of the remaining consonants. It's great for finding spelling errors. Alpha clean only analyzes the English alphabet A through Z and numbers 0 through 9. All foreign characters and all punctuation will be ignored. And then finally, transpose does not care about word order in a field. It just cares that all words exist. Okay, and so which of these you apply, I mean, it's really where matching becomes more of an art than a science, right? In this particular set of data, I don't like to use transpose. And by the way, I always forget to point these little greens, I'm sorry, those aren't green, those are orange circles out. If you hover over them, it'll remind you what they do. Okay, match blank is not going to be relevant here because account name is a required field, so we'll talk about it in a minute. So let's save our first scenario rule. And now we're going to add another one for first name. When you do name matching, by the way, hint, 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 do first name and last name separately. Don't do the full name. Okay, the full name is a formula field that just concatenates first name and last name field. And while I guess it would technically work, and it does, when you match on the first name, we have a mapping type for that. It's not going to work if you do the full name. It's called the first name mapping type. And it matches nicknames. So if somebody's inserting John and Jonathan exist, or Steve to Stephen, Pam to Pamela, it references another list in the DupeBlocker settings tab. So let me go back here, and that's right here, your first name mappings. This list ships with the tool. I may have added a few values based on various trainings that I've done. But so, for example, if somebody's inserting Abby, but Abigail exists, or vice versa, somebody's inserting Abigail and Abby exists, Abe to Abraham. It is a pretty exhaustive list of nicknames, but if you do find any that were missed, you can, again, add your own entries. This one's probably a little bit, the fields are named are a little bit better, but the nickname in this field and the formal name in this field. Okay. So back to the scenario. first name is not a required field, so we can talk about match blank. Okay, so what match blank does, if I turn it on for first name, well, let's talk about if it's not checked, which is the default. The incoming record and the existing record must have a first name populated, and they must match. What match blank does is it allows matches to be seen if the incoming record is missing the first name field and the existing record. So what I like to be clear about with match blank, though, is sometimes people think it means if I check this box and somebody inserts a record with a first name, but the existing record does not have a first name, it will detect the match. And that is not the case. It's only where both are blank. Okay. So we'll save that. We're going to add last name. Now, we don't have a last name specific mapping type. I like to use exact, but what I've seen other people do is match the first few letters or words. Okay. I like to use exact. I think it's one of the rare examples, the last name field is one of the rare examples where all of these matching algorithms on the right work really well. English fuzzy to find spelling errors. Alpha clean to strip out any punctuation. Because with hyphenated last names, a lot of times one person will add the hyphen and another person will just add a space. So we need to have that hyphen ignored. And hyphenated last names for transpose as well. Somehow those have a way of getting flip-flopped. And word order won't matter here. Last name being a required field, match blank is not relevant. Save that. And we are going to add one more condition for email. And again, I like to use exact because that is a pretty distinct feature of someone. Okay, and now we've just set up the matching. So when a record is inserted or updated to match another existing record where the account name matches, the first name matches, last name, and email, it's going to circle back up here, and if it was an insert, it's going to report the duplicate, and if it was an update, it's going to report the duplicate. Okay, the scenario rules are ANDed, so account name and first name and last name and email must match. And you cannot OR here. Okay, if you need to OR, you need another scenario. So if you wanted, for example, to say account name, first name, last name, email, or phone, you would need a second scenario where you match account name, first name, last name, phone. Moving down to filters. The filtering discussion gets rather complex. So when we do not have enable dual filters on, which is the default, we have one scenario filter. And within that filter, we actually have two options that behave very differently. We can have an object-based filter, so based on an attribute of the contact record, or we can have a user-based filter. So so that could be a specific user, a profile, or a role. Okay, and they do behave very differently, as I mentioned. So when we have a user, a user filter, any one of these. Let's actually add one. Let's say Kelly. We know Kelly does not look for her duplicates. So we want this scenario only to apply to records that Kelly updates or inserts. Okay. You don't actually need the user ID. You can search for Kelly in this box. Okay. And I believe this is the person I'm logged in as. When we have a user-based filter, it's going to take anything updated or inserted by Kelly and compare it to all other records in the database. Object-based filters don't work like that. How object-based filters work, so let's just add one. Let's say the contact mailing state equals Arizona. Okay. When we have an object-based filter, both the incoming record and the existing record must have a mailing state equal to Arizona. Okay. That's a very limiting feature though. And that's why dual filters was enabled, or I'm sorry, introduced. So when we use dual filters, let me turn that on, we now see another related list down here. And our DupeBlocker scenario filters related list repurposes as the quote unquote source filter. It applies to the record being updated or inserted. And then we have a target filter, which applies to the records that are existing. Okay, so if I wanted to take all records where the mailing state equals Arizona and compare those to all other records, not just other records where the state equals Arizona, I actually would leave this related list blank. But I could also have a very specific target filter. So take all the incoming or updated records where the state equals Arizona and compare those to records owned by Kelly, because that's her territory. So we can add a target filter. And with target filters, you can only have an object-based filter. You can't have a user-based filter. And we'll say owner equals Kelly. You don't ever really need the IDs. You can always search for it. Okay, so when it looks like this, oops, looks like I forgot my field here for the criteria. Sorry about that. But when it looks like this, it's going to take all those records incoming and updated where the mailing state equals Arizona and compare it to records owned by Kelly. Okay. All right. So I'm actually going to delete my filters. We're going to test this now. I always find when I leave them there, I forget to put the state in, and then it never works, which stinks. But we're going to test inserting records where these fields match, and then we're going to look at the action. And we're going to start with report duplicate, which will allow me to save my record. And when it detects a duplicate, it's going to create a warning record. When warnings are created, we can choose to have a task created for the warning. And this will make more sense once we turn it on and go look for it. The default is no. We're going to create a task so you can see what that does. When we create a task, we can have that task owned by the current user, which is the person who is responsible for inserting that duplicate, or the scenario owner, which is usually an admin of some sort, or both people. In my case, I'm going to be the same person, so we'll say the scenario owner. And now let's go test it. But we need to rebuild our keys. So we're going to do that first, then we'll test it. So when this box is checked for rebuild needed, where you rebuild your keys is here. We can rebuild the keys just for this scenario, or we can rebuild all keys for all deployed scenarios. Okay, I think I only have this one and one other one. And before we do that, we need to have a key building discussion in the settings tab under general settings. We've got key builder type equals original. This is the default. You can, however, use the batch apex. So the original runs a little bit faster. but it is less stable. Batch apex runs a little bit slower, but it is more stable. I personally prefer the batch apex because you can kick off the key rebuild and then you can shut it down and it's going to email you when it's done building the keys. We're going to use original so that I can show you what I'm talking about here, but when you use the original, when you do your key build, you need to stay on that tab. Otherwise, the key building will be interrupted. So now let's go rebuild the keys. You can see it's going to go fast. I'm in a dev org, but this red, there it goes. Well, you can still kind of read it. Do not leave this page until the key building has completed or the process will be interrupted. That moved really fast because I'm in a dev org. I don't have a whole lot of information in here. Okay, but if you've got hundreds of thousands of records, you may not want to sit there and wait for it. Okay, now we can go test this scenario. Getting ahead of myself here. So we'll go to the sales tab and we'll go to contacts. We're going to create a new contact and I don't know why I'm all of a sudden going blank on a name. I guess Sarah Wilson. Okay. We will put her on the CRM Fusion account. And we'll give her an email. Okay, this is going to be our first one, so it's not going to match. Okay, but we're going to clone it, which will simulate an insertion. And we'll give her a birthday of, I guess, today. So that you can see that when I save this record, my record was saved. There's the birth date. And if we were to search my org for Sarah Wilson, I've got 2. Okay, so my record was inserted. Now, a warning was created, and that's going to be managed a few different places. The first possible place is you can add it as a related list on the record itself. So kind of identifying, here's the other duplicate record. There's my task pop-up. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay. You can drill into the warning from this related list. And this is what I was talking about. It allows me to review the data before I commit to either merging these records, or if I decide that they are not in fact duplicates, I can delete this warning record. Which brings me to a point. If for whatever reason you determine that these are not in fact duplicates and you don't want to merge them, I highly recommend deleting the warning. Okay, and the reason is because when you start to get a lot of warnings out there, a lot's a relative term. I guess I would probably define it as a few 100,000, and nobody's doing anything with them. It can cause DupeBlocker to experience issues running through the code. Okay, so I don't recommend leaving a lot of duplicate warnings out there. On this warning, I've added a key. This is not here by default, but I like to show everybody what a key is since I talk about it a lot. It is a concatenation of the fields that I matched on with the mapping types applied and the matching algorithms applied. Okay, so these 2 records have this key. The 392 is an auto number. Your scenarios are auto numbered. And that's all that is. So if we look at the scenario, it's got a scenario number of 392. Okay, so a related list on the record itself, and that's just like any other related list. You go into the page layout and you can add it. Another place that you can manage your warnings, that pop-up that I got here. So I told it to create a task. And by default, there's a reminder set for that task, which is why I'm getting this pop-up. If we drill into the task, which I guess it went to this tab, gives me a link to the warning as well. Okay. The third place you can manage warnings is on the scenario itself. I know I got it open here somewhere. Okay. So on the scenario itself, if I refresh this, I now see in my last related list down here all of the warnings for this scenario, also kind of known as the duplicates this scenario has detected. And then the fourth and final place you can manage your warnings is we have a whole tab here for your duplicate warnings. What's in here? These are all of the warnings in your org for all of your scenarios. It's probably like the most high-level place that you're going to be able to manage these. We've built in these views, although you could create your own. You could look at all of them. I don't know what I've got in here. Okay. I've got a lead one and a contact one. Okay, so those are the four places you can manage it. I'm going to clone Sarah Wilson a few times because I want to show you something before we actually execute a merge. That's kind of neat. We're going to create a lot of them. So let's clone, save, clone, save. So you see how that list down there is getting bigger because I keep cloning it. Clone, save. Okay, so we've got 5 Sarah Wilsons in here now, the one we're looking at, and then the 4 that she matched to. What I wanted to show you about merging from a warning is you're not limited to the 3 at a time like you are through the Salesforce merge. When we do merge and convert duplicates, it is using the Salesforce merge call, but I can do all of them at once. I don't have to go 3 at a time like you do through Salesforce. So very similar to Salesforce, I choose which fields I want to survive by selecting the radio buttons. This is a bunch of clones, so I don't think it really matters. Okay, and when I choose merge selected, all 5 of those are going to go merge. And when we merge via the warning actually cleans up after itself. So now that related list is blank. Okay. Okay, great. Let's go look at another option on an insert. So we're going to now look at, we looked at report duplicate. Let's look at do not insert now. When I choose do not insert, as I mentioned before, the user is going to see you cannot enter this record in red text, and they're going to be provided a link to the existing record. Actually, before I do that, I want to clone Sarah again and create one more warning. So I want to show you what happens if it matches to more than one record. Clone this. So now we know we have 2 Sarahs in there. Okay, now we're going to change this to do not insert. Okay, by default, the block bypassing is unchecked. So there's going to be no way for me to enter my newly cloned record. We're going to look at it both ways, but what this checkbox does is it stops the user, gives them the error in red text, And then they'll be provided a gray button where they can say, yeah, insert the record anyway. But we'll look at that next. That pop-up that keeps coming up does so because I have to report duplicate task for warning. And as I mentioned before, the reminder is set on that. If you want the task created, but not that pop-up coming up all the time, it's kind of annoying. You can disable that in the settings tab. It's going to be this box right here, disable warning task reminders. So that will create the task, but you won't get that annoying pop-up. All right, let's go clone Sarah again and look at the user experience for blocking. I think I deleted this one. Yeah. Okay, so let's clone this. Let's give it a department. Okay, and when I try to save the record, I'm being blocked. I'm seeing my error in red text, and I'm being provided links to the 2 existing Sarah Wilsons. Okay, the only thing I can do here is follow these links or cancel out of it. So if I just spent 30 minutes filling out this record, that could have been a giant waste of my time, right? So that's also why we introduced the block bypassing. Not everybody allows it. Some people are just like, they should have looked anyway, and they don't care. But if you do want to allow your users to kind of make the decision, we can turn on the block bypassing. Okay, so let's go reclone this record. And when we allow for block bypassing, same user experience, get my error and my links, and then I've got this box here for bypass block. It will allow me to insert my record anyway. Okay, when you allow for block bypassing, by default, it will create a warning record, what we were looking at for report duplicate. So when somebody bypasses a block, it'll report the duplicate for you. And most people want that to occur. They want to know if people are bypassing the block. But if you don't want the warning created, you can go to the settings tab. Ooh, I'm starting to get too many tabs open here, guys. Hold on a second. Okay, the settings tab. And you can uncheck this box. Block bypass creates warnings. It is checked by default because most people want to know if people are bypassing the block. But if you don't want to know, you can deselect that. Okay. And I wanted more than one Sarah Wilson in here because I wanted to bring up a use case for using your own custom Apex code. So if I clone this again and save it, so it's showing me all the Sarah Wilsons. But the name is all we're going to get with DupeBlocker standard functionality. Okay, so a use case for calling in your own custom Apex code is if you can build a screen that brings in all of this information plus other fields, like maybe you want to know, I don't know, the city, state, phone number, email address, or something like that to this screen. You can do that. But standard DupeBlocker functionality, it's only going to show you the name, and there's no way around that. All right. Okay, I need to start closing some tabs down. Give me a second here. Next, we're going to look at redirect to existing. And then we're going to go clone our Sarah Wilson record. we will give it an assistant. Okay, and when I push the save button here, my record's not going to be saved. I'm going to be redirected to one of the Sarah Wilson records. And I'm getting this gray pop-up letting me know that I was redirected. It doesn't go away till I click close. So which one did it take me to? There's really no way to know that. I just know that there's this one, and then there are these 3 other ones. So if there's more than one potential duplicate or possible duplicate, they will be listed up here. Okay, again, we can't get any more information in DupeBlocker standard functionality other than the name. But if you're going to use redirect to existing, that's a good use case as to why maybe you would want to create your own custom Visualforce page. Okay, you can put whatever fields you want in it and then have them displayed up here or wherever you put it actually. Okay, redirect goes pretty quickly. The next one we're going to look at is auto merge. I'm going to edit this. We're not going to look at do nothing. I think you can take my word for it that it'll just insert the record and not do anything. Okay, auto merge. Let's go clone Sarah Wilson again. And we'll give this Sarah Wilson a favorite color of red. And when I save my record, it's actually going to save. So here we can see on the screen, here's my new record. It's got a favorite color of red. But if I refresh it, I get the record deleted. Okay, because that merge occurred after I saved it. So need to open all my Sarah Wilsons. Okay, so it looks like it merged it into this record because it's got a favorite color of red. So how did it decide which one to merge into? And that's something you can define in the auto merge settings. So when you choose auto merge, this gray box appears here. And the very first field here, the merge target, is where you're going to tell it which record to merge to if it matches to more than one. So the default is the oldest record, but you could choose newest or last updated record. Okay, and you really can't customize anything about this. If it matches more than one, here are your options. Another misconception about DupeBlocker is, okay, it matched to 3 Sarah Wilson records. People think it's going to merge all of those together, and that's not the case. It's only going to merge the incoming one to one other one in Salesforce, and right, it's going to be the oldest record. These next 2 fields, we're going to choose what action we want to take for our mergeable fields and our non-mergeable fields. Okay, so let's define what a mergeable field is. A mergeable field is a long area text field, a multi-select pick list, or a true-false field. Fields of those 3 types can be merged, meaning you can take the data on the incoming record and add to the existing record. But you can only do that for 3 field types. So let me say them again. Long area text, multi-select pick list, and true-false fields. A non-mergeable field is a field of any other field type. Okay, so we need to choose our default actions for mergeable fields and non-mergeable fields. So in this drop-down, we can choose to merge the values. I think this is what most people choose for mergeable fields. They just want to take what's on that incoming record and add to the existing record. And actually, let me clarify a point here. Mergeable field, long area text, multi-select pick list will just add the values on the incoming record onto the existing. merging a true-false field. What that means, because a field can't be true and false, what that means is that the true value will survive. Okay, so if I were to merge values, say for an email opt-out, and the incoming record says true and the existing record says false, it will update that existing record to say true, aka the box is checked. Conversely, if the incoming record says false and the existing record says true, the existing record will be left true, aka the box checked, when we choose merge values. Our other options, though, you can choose to overwrite, which means take the data for fields of those 3 types and overwrite the existing record. You can choose update if blank, so only update that existing record for fields of those 3 types if it's blank. And then finally, ignore means ignore what's in the incoming record for fields of those 3 types and just keep what's on the existing. Okay. I think, like I said, most people choose merge. For fields of all other field types, we choose a default action, which is going to be the exact same options except merge. So overwrite, take what's on the incoming record and overwrite all my fields. Update if blank, so only update them if they're blank on the existing record, or ignore. Ignore what's on that incoming record. Now these are default actions. We can always overwrite them. So let's say I want to overwrite for my non-mergeable fields. I figure the incoming data has the newest data, and so I want to overwrite the existing data with that. Except for my lead source field. I always want to keep the original lead source, so I want to ignore that field. And that's what this middle section does. It allows you to overwrite whatever default action you've chosen. So for my lead source, that one I want to ignore and keep what's on the existing record. When you do this, you do have to remember to hit add so that it drops down here. And I guess I highlight that because I am always a culprit of that. I always forget to hit that add button and then I scratch my head like, why isn't it working? Okay. Include in task, the default when we auto merge is to create a task. It's going to give it a generic subject that we've defined here, but you can call it whatever you'd like. The due date, standard task stuff here, right? In this case, the owner can be the current owner, which is the person who inserted the duplicate, or the owner of the master record. Okay. And then the final field here is the merge priority. Default is always going to be 10. It is important to set your merge priorities if you have scenarios where an incoming record could fire 2 auto merge scenarios. So if we go back to the anding and oring, I said, well, if you want to do account name, first name, last name, email, or phone, you need 2 scenarios. Okay. And if an incoming record, let's say you have those 2 scenarios and they're both set to auto merge, and an incoming record matches first account name, first name, last name, email, and phone, DupeBlocker is going to choke if we don't tell it which scenario should do the auto merge. Okay, so the lower the number, the higher the priority. So if I call it 1, this one's going to take precedent over number 2. Oh, one more thing about the task that is created. What is contained in that task is the data from the subordinate record. So if you ever needed to reference back to it, you can do so via this task. So if we want to look at our Sarah Wilson record, the one with red, it should have a task, and it does. And what's in here are the fields from the subordinate record. But let's clone this again. Let's clone it. Let's give it a different lead source because we told it not to update that. So we'll say, well, what is it before? Hold on, what is it right now? Well, I guess it's blank. Oh well, we'll do it anyway. Oops, we don't want to delete that. We want to clone it. We want to give it a lead source of clone inquiry, and we're going to give it a favorite color, blue. Okay, and now let's save it. Refresh it. It's gone. And it merged into this record. So now it says blue, and the lead source is blank because I told it to keep the data from the for the lead source on the original record. If we want to look at that scenario, it's going to be an activity history now. I believe this is the one we just did. Here we can see the lead source was phone inquiry. Okay. And that's the auto merge. So that kind of completes all of the actions that we're going to take a look at. If you have any questions, go ahead and start typing them. I'm going to move into, I'm already in the DupeBlocker app. I'm going to talk about some of the settings that we haven't addressed yet. But if you're typing, I'm definitely going to come back to it. So import or export settings and import settings. Actually, before I get too far ahead of here, let me just see, I did see a question come in. Let's take a look at this. Can I share my email address? My personal email address? Yeah. Well, if I could figure out how to respond to you. Okay. Kelly, I think this is what you're asking me for, or I don't know if it was something else in the demo, but. Okay, so there's my email address. Okay, export and import settings. If you want to build DupeBlocker in a sandbox and then migrate it to production or any other org, right? Any org to org migration. You can export settings. It's going to export to a JSON file, and then you would log in to the other org and do an import settings. So when you do this, though, I just recommend don't even open the JSON file, just save it. I've seen issues where just it doesn't migrate correctly if you even open it. I think somebody was trying to just rename it. They didn't edit anything in there. So just save it somewhere. That's one option for building in org A and then putting it in org B. There's other options though, and quite honestly, I think this might be a little bit easier. So when you can build your scenarios directly in your production org or whatever org you want it to be in, and you can use filters to actually, so that it doesn't affect your users. So for example, I built this, right? But I only want it to apply to system administrators while I'm testing it. So I can add a scenario filter that says the current user profile is system administrator. This way it's not affecting my users as I'm building it. Okay. And then once it's tested and you want to deploy it, I often find that people will go into the filter. Oops. We want to go into the edit. And they'll just switch the operator. So that then the not equals system administrator, because they want it to apply to everybody but the system administrators, because typically you don't want to block system administrators from entering records. Okay. Back to the settings tab here. The advanced settings, the insert action tracking field and the update action tracking field. This allows you to create fields on your objects that will record the action that DupeBlocker took. So for example, if you have an auto merge setting on leads, right? You can create a field on the leads, and if this were in edit mode, you would just put the API name in there. And when an auto merge occurs, it will populate that field. It'll say merge. Or if it was a do not insert or redirect, it will say block. Or if it reported a duplicate, it will say warn. Okay, these are often used when people are trying to write code around the action that DupeBlocker is taking. There's really no use case other than that, except for one that I'm aware of. Insert action tracking field. If you have, if you assign leads via a round robin, and you have a scenario set to auto merge, the assignment of the record occurs before the auto merge. So if a record comes in, it is assigned to Kelly, then it is merged. Kelly just lost her place in the line. So you can create a field on your lead record to record that, and then you can filter it out of the lead assignment rule so that Kelly doesn't miss her spot in the line. Over here, we didn't do any state matching or country matching, but if you do, we have mapping types for state and country, and they reference these two lists. Starting with the state matching, this list ships with the tool for Canadian provinces and US states, but obviously you can add your own entry. So say if you're working with Australian data, you can put in your Australian states or Indian states. Let's just look at CA as an example, but if anybody enters one of these values in a state field and you're matching on state, it'll all be seen as CA. Okay, I guess, and you can add your own values too. New York, I think, is interesting. I guess we don't, it doesn't ship with a lot, but I've actually seen people add this. So I guess some people will put Big Apple in there, and I can have that seen as New York. Okay. Country matching, very similar, just that it does it on the country level. So if anybody inserts a country value, let's look at the US, a country value equal to any of these things, it will all be seen as US. When you add values to these, and I don't know if a lot of people do, I guess some people do, you never want to create a circular reference. And so what I mean by that is I've seen people do this, and it actually breaks DupeBlocker. So we're already taking USA and seeing it as US. Some people will then add a new entry that says US should be seen as USA. Okay, so if you do this, it ends up in a circular reference, and it chokes. So you don't ever want to do that. You want to, well, it ships with the 2-digit abbreviation, but if you wanted to change that, I guess you could. So pick one country code and then have all possible values be seen as that country code. And I got to delete this before I forget and break my DupeBlocker. Okay, this web lead sources, we're going to table for when we talk about leads. The final thing we need to talk about are the dashboards and reports. The reports are just the source reports for the dashboards. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot in here. They're really elementary reports. We are working on, we have a lot of feature requests on beefing this up, and it is kind of on the way, but here's what we've got right now. Actually, let me refresh it, because, well, April 4th was, yeah, I'm going to refresh it so that it's new. And I guess while it's refreshing, I can just kind of talk about the tiles. DupeBlocker auto merge totals will tell you how many records were auto merged. It breaks it out by date. Those are weeks, by the way. DupeBlocker warning. Okay, so this is kind of a running total. The DupeBlocker warnings by user and scenario. This is a real-time count. So right now I've got one contact warning and one lead warning. If I were to go merge those records and refresh this dashboard, this is going to change. Right now, what I think is the most useful on this screen is the scenario effectiveness. So this tells you how many records your scenarios are blocking and or merging. Okay, and the reason I drilled into it. The reason I think this is important is because you actually have a limit as to how many scenario rules you can have per object, and that limit is 40. So if you are seeing that a scenario is not being particularly effective and you need to repurpose those rules, it'll help you to identify that. Okay. And then this one's also useful, largest duplicate warnings. So your warnings and how many potential duplicates are on here, on each of those warnings. The reason this is important is because test data can take up, you know, if you have a scenario that's matching email only and everybody uses test@test.com like everybody does, right? You can have a warning with 50,000 potential duplicates on it. And that's another case where if you have a lot of potential duplicates, DupeBlocker can start to break down. So I would keep my eye on that and maybe merge some, or you can delete them as well. Okay. So I'm ready to move into a few considerations for lead scenarios. If you don't use leads, like I said, you're more than welcome to stay and listen. Or you can drop off at this point, and it's not too much longer for the rest of you, so it looks like I'm going to be giving you a good chunk of your day back today. So let's go to the DupeBlocker settings tab and talk about this web lead source. And actually, no, we're going to start with the scenario that I created before I got on the call from my lead scenario. Okay, real basic scenario. I'm just matching email address exact, and it is marked, it is a blocking action, which means it's either marked for do not insert or redirect. Okay, if I have a scenario like this and I use web to lead, you don't ever want to block records coming in from an automated process. Okay, you could add a filter down here that says, you know, does not, you know, lead source is not equal X, whatever that lead source you use for your web to leads. But you don't even need to do that, because that's exactly what this, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place here. That's exactly what this does for you. So if you have scenarios, lead scenarios set to do not insert or redirect, you want to make sure your lead source is in here. We're looking at the ones that ship with the tool, but you can add your own. Okay, that way those web leads will not be blocked it will report the duplicate instead. Okay, so let's go look at what that means. I've got, if we pick a lead that I've got here, we'll pick this one. Okay, we're going to clone it, and it's got a web inquiry as lead source. If I save it, I'm being blocked. Okay, but if it came in from the web, it's going to have a different lead source, right? It's going to say something to the effect of web or whatever you've called it. Oops, let me cancel out of it first and reclone. So if my web lead source is in here, I can save it, and I'm not going to be blocked. Instead, it's going to report the duplicate. Okay, so I have mine here because I have to show you guys. But if your users figure out that they can bypass DupeBlocker by selecting web, I believe this is the one of the default options. We've actually seen cases where people have figured that out, and we've gotten cases DupeBlocker is not detecting duplicates. So there's no mechanism to make sure it's actually coming in from the web. It's whatever value is in here. So you may want to remove that option from being seen by your users. Oh. So we have a question here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer it. I mean, I can try. It's just everything is so customized as to the way people use Salesforce. But the question is this. Can we briefly touch on the pros and cons of using leads in Salesforce? And so that's just, unfortunately, one of those things where, I mean, it just depends on how your org is set up. I guess typically leads would be used for people who are not qualified, right? And if you wanted to keep those into like a different bucket than your qualified contacts or your customers or however, like again, even people who use leads define that distinction differently. One use case that I can think of is why you would want to do that is because a lot of times you want to talk to your leads differently than your contacts. So if you're doing any email and you need to customize people who are not yet qualified, you want to send them a certain set of emails, that's one reason why you would want to keep them separate. I mean, you could also do that all within the contact object too, just have some sort of status on them. So it just depends on how you want to use it. Cool. All right. All right, so web lead sources, where the lead source equals web will not be blocked. It will report the duplicate instead. Okay. All right, and the last thing we're going to talk about with leads are lead to contact and lead to account scenarios. So what these scenarios are is where somebody's inserting a lead and a contact already exists, or somebody's inserting a lead and the account exists. So it's kind of a cross-object option. And I'm kind of once bitten, twice shy going through this on a live demo because last time I floundered horribly because we all know how live demos go. But what I'm going to attempt to do here is create a very simple lead to contact scenario and set it to auto convert. That's where it went south last time. So I'm just giving you the heads up that we might flounder here. Okay, so let's call this lead. Whoops. We'll do this on the lead to account. So lead to contact think I just said account, but I meant contact. Okay, and actually we're going to look at do not insert first. Thanks, Joel. You should have been on the last DupeBlocker training. I floundered terribly when I tried to show this. Okay, and we are going to say you cannot enter this lead because the contact exists. Deploy it. Okay, and now we're going to add a scenario rule. We're going to keep it simple. But when we do lead to contact or lead to account, we do need to pick a lead field to match to a contact field. So email to email. I'm going to keep the mapping type exact. And we're going to rebuild the keys. And we're going to hold our breath that this works. So the first thing I need to do is go enter a contact. Put this on IBM. Okay, give it an email. I'm going to copy that. So this person, as far as I know, does not exist in here. So when I save it, it's going to be fine. Now we're going to go enter the lead. Okay. And here's where we hold our breath. Oh, we got to give it a lead source. Save. Yes. Okay. So I was blocked because that contact already exists and it gave me a link to that contact. Our lead to contact scenarios only work one direction by default. The incoming lead, right, there's already a contact. It can work both directions, but you need to remember to do something. So meaning I want to block contacts coming in if the lead exists. So what that is called, it's right here, block account contact matches. So if we want to look at it without checking that box first, let's insert a lead and then the contact. So we'll insert, I don't think, I'm running out of people here. Lauren, I know who I'm going to use. Shoot, we'll try my sister, I don't know. Okay, so IBM, hopefully she doesn't exist in here. Oh, looks like she does. We'll give her a different email address. There we go. Okay, so we've just inserted lead for Lauren. When that box is unchecked for it working in both directions, I'm going to be able to insert this contact. Okay, Control V, and we're going to save, and we'll see that this contact's going to go in. Some people only want it working one direction. They only want leads detected if the contact exists. But other people want it working both directions. So if we go turn this on, okay, and let's go try to, let's delete this and try to enter it again. Sorry, I'm just making sure all my settings are right. Okay. Ah, good. I was blocked. So now in this case, it's saying you can't enter this. Well, I didn't change it, but I know that I just tried to enter the contact and it's not letting me because the lead exists. So if we want to right click and open this in another tab, we can see there's the matching lead. Okay. All right, cool. So that kind of completes the demo. Does anybody have any questions? Looks like we had a mass exodus when we started talking about leads anyway. So there's another answer to your question, Joel, right? Like, I know a lot of people use leads, but I would also say a lot of people don't use leads. Okay. All right. Well, if you're typing a question, I'm going to come back to it. Just a few closing statements. Your tool is supported. If you need to reach out to us, you can do so via the tech support tile in the DupeBlocker Today page. I never access it here, though. I'm going to show you another place where you can get to it. Let's go to CRM Fusion. CRM. Okay. The very first tab is support, and you can open a case here. Okay. Now, unfortunately, we did have to end direct technical support for our not-for-profit granted users. That program just became too big to support. But if you're with a not-for-profit, still reach out to us. We will send back a canned email, but it's going to contain links where you can get additional assistance. So maybe rather than trying to find those resources on your own, we can shoot them right back to you. Okay, so question. We've got a lot of dupes. Oh, it's Julia again. Okay, I'm on to you two now. Okay, so we've got a lot of dupes, almost 1 million leads. Any suggestion for starting a cleanup project? So they're existing. So the tool that you're actually going to want to use is demand tools, single table dedupe. So DupeBlocker only works with detecting single inserts and updates. If you want to look at that, your existing state of the data, right, the duplicates that currently exist, you do want to use demand tool single table dedupe to do that. So you guys were on my training earlier. I'm just going to show you where you can sign up for that training, but just email me directly and I will send you a previously recorded single table dedupe if you haven't yet taken it. But so in the live training, if you wanted to attend a single table dedupe, you usually have one a week, except this week. So it does, oh, right here, next Tuesday at 2. So just email me. I'll send you a previously recorded one. And that's where you're going to get started with cleaning up your existing duplicates. And by the way, everybody who's left, best practice when using DupeBlocker is to clean up your existing duplicates first before using DupeBlocker for when it does match to more than one record. Ideally, we don't want that to happen, right? I don't want to have to make decisions on which one it should merge to. I should only have one. Okay. And then, so we've got the fundamentals class. I think that's going to be a good starting point. And then you could go on to take the advanced as well. This is going to get you started. This is going to take it a little bit further. So I guess it depends on what you're trying to do exactly. In fact, I will just send both of you, send both of these to you. Okay. And okay, so we have a lot of similar business names. Okay, so hold on, maybe that was like part of the last one. Starting to clean up project. So we have a lot of similar business names. Okay. So the mapping types that we talked about today are also going to be available in demand tools. Also, this training that I'm going to send does go through pretty extensive account name matching. So you can use the cleaned account name, you can use the first XX words, you can use the acronym, and I believe it's the first exam, probably the first hour of that is account name matching, okay? Cool. All right, well, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I'm going to give you guys 25 minutes of your day back. Quick reminder, if you want a copy of the recording, just go ahead and email me directly, okay? You can respond to a confirmation email, or you'll be getting a follow-up email. Actually, you know what? I'm covering for Ashley today, so everybody who dropped off doesn't even know that. They're going to be emailing Ashley for the review, but that's okay. Or I'm sorry, not the review, the recording. That's okay. She'll let me know they do that. So I shared my email address with everybody. You can just email me directly requesting the video, and I will send it when it's done converting. All right? All right. Well, thank you for joining me, and have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.